So the talk is something that a lot of families of color, though sometimes all families, but predominantly families of color and mainly Black families engage in with their children. It's a back and forth, it's a process where families are engaging in strategies on how to stay psychologically and sometimes physically safe from dangerous racial situations. So when we're talking about ways to improve the talk, it's not a script. It's not, here's a bullet, 10 bullet points of ways to do something. It really is a process. It's really a back and forth dynamic between parent and child. And the construct that we utilized within this study is called racial socialization competency. So it's not just what is it that you're saying, it's the skill, it's the confidence, and it's the stress level inherent in that conversation. So essentially these cognitive or physiological aspects that allow us to engage in conversation more effectively are some of the things that we're thinking about improving upon. So it's not just what do you say, it's more of a how and why would you say these things? Can we help to reduce some of the stress that comes along with having this conversation? Can we give you more tools? Can we provide better strategies? Those are some of the process-oriented pieces that go along with this rather than just say this, do this, and that approach to it. Some parents ask, will I harm my child by talking to them more? That's something that we get all the time. Will I harm my child if I talk to them about race, if I introduce this idea of race to my child? This study really shows the importance of that. So it's showing that race is not a construct that does not matter. It absolutely impacts us. So we know discrimination leads to greater worries for the parent. We know that if we don't do anything about those worries, that they're going to show up in some way in your child. So the idea that talking about race is actually negatively impacting your child's mental health is almost opposed in this study. We're saying if you don't say anything, it's going to manifest, it's going to show up in your child's psychological outcomes. So what we're saying here is if we are able to engage in conversations with our child that are competent, that are full of hope, that are full of expertise, then we're going to be helping our children to be better children. We're going to help to absolve them of some of these depression or anxious outcomes. We have a therapeutic practice within our lab called the Engaging, Managing, and Bonding Through Race program. That practice actually does help families to process, what do you want to say? What happened to you as a child? What do you want to say better to your child? Let's practice it with your child. So we're actually in the field doing this work with families so that we can improve parents' competency because we want children who have better psychological outcomes. And that's what this study really helped us to show, that construct of racial socialization competency is important in doing exactly what we set out to do, which is to improve psychological outcomes for children who are facing racial discrimination in the world. One of the constructs that we posited was responsible for how parents' racial discrimination made its way over to the psychological well-being of their children. That racial worries construct was indeed something that could account for what was going on between the parent and the child, so that the parent experienced racial discrimination. The more that they experienced racial discrimination, the more worried they were that their child would experience that discrimination. And the more worried they were, the worse outcomes psychologically their child had. So again, internalizing like depression or anxiety outcomes, and also externalizing the way that they would act out perhaps in a classroom or social environment. So that was the first finding, that racial worries is a significant mediator of parents' racial discrimination and child's psychological outcomes. The second finding, and the thing that is most encouraging for us, is that even though racial worries is a mediator between racial discrimination and psychological outcomes for adolescents, this construct of racial socialization competency moderated this relationship. So it went a little something like this. Racial discrimination predicts worries, worries predicts psychological outcomes, but racial socialization competency moderates the relationship between worries and psychological outcomes. That means that if parents are able to feel confident, if they are able to reduce their stress and they feel that they have enough skill when they're talking to children about racism, that reduces the effect of their worries on their child's outcome. That means they could still experience discrimination, they could still be worried, but what they do between the parent and child, that conversation that they have about race, helps to reduce and attenuate what the child is experiencing, their anxiety, their depression. So it's really powerful because it's taking into account what is happening in the world around us. We know that racism exists. We know that it's healthy for parents to feel worried about their children and their safety of their children. But we know that there are things that the family can do to reduce those outcomes on the child. So that second finding for us, with its implications and with its application of what we can actually do to improve parents' conversations about race, is really important for us.